Slumpbuster Nation, it is officially episode 50. Now, I ask everyone to raise a glass to my co-host, to all you all listening out there. 50 episodes in to 50 more on three. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Slumpbuster. Quiet on the set, make sure my mic is on. There is Dre and Ju-Ju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for two, so damn rude, recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy, no way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction, kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest, what's the basis? Pick an athlete, let's debate this game. Outrageous trading places, sudden death, take 10 paces. Turn and shoot, boys the truth, Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place, dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals. Phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls. Every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up. Free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start. I suggest you buckle up.
That is the finest $6 champagne you can buy on the market. It's even called Andres. Like, how perfect is that, MMA Dre?
It just works.
Am I right?
It just works. See, you're welcome, Ju-Ju. You're welcome.
I mean, hey, you guys only provide the best wine or sparkling champagne. Sparkling wine, right? Would be the technical term.
Mm-hmm.
If we're being
and it's
accurate.
The world's finest for $6.
World's finest. Ballers on a budget. Andres sparkling wine. Anyway, guys, I'm your host, Ju-Ju Talk Sports. This is my co-host, MMA Dre. As you heard in the intro here, we are officially celebrating our 50th episode. 5-0, the big 5-0. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see our faces. So figured we had to get a little bit spiffy, you know. Got the bow tie rocking here. So, I mean, this is a lesson moving forward for the audio-only listeners. We do have a visual element from time to time. We can throw that in there. We do have that, like, pitch in our back pocket there. Mm-hmm. So 50 episodes in, Dre, how did we make it here?
I know it's been a wild ride. I mean, we started last August, September timeframe, and then we've gone through. And I've got to say, this has been by far sort of the craziest year I think that we've probably had in sports. So it was a good time for us to hop in.
You know, it's kind of funny when you think about like stuff like the COVID situation and all that being a part of this general sports year. You would think it wouldn't be the greatest time to start a sports podcast. But here we are. We're battling through. This is going to be like the first episode in a while that it's actually just going to be you and I. I think that's kind of significant because, hey, I mean, we started, we got everything going, we got the ball rolling August 1st of 2019, and here we are on June 1st of 2020. So closing on that year mark, might have to break out the $6 champagne again here in a couple months. That's probably what we're looking at. Is there like any surprises that really caught you off guard, like when you first got to the podcasting thing?
So getting into the podcasting thing, I don't know. I think all of it was pretty straightforward. I thought you and we did, a pretty good job right from the get-go. It was a little bit harder adjusting to like the filler words, right? So the ums, the ahs, and then making things just flow smoothly. There was times where, we'd have like a 2.5-hour podcast, right? Where we're shoving so much into one episode. And then not knowing how to be short and succinct with our points and our arguments. But now I think we've gotten to this sort of flow, a rhythm. We've spaced out the podcast, right? So it's usually we do 2 a week now rather than just one long one. So I think getting down the rhythm was a little bit challenging at first. But overall, I've really enjoyed the experience. What about you?
Well, you know what? I think it's provided a lot of great experiences in terms of getting better. Yeah, I don't know if you've listened back to the first episode. It's a little rough. There's a little bit of like learning curve that comes into this. And one of the big things, so like now on our IG, I feel like I'm getting a lot of people dropping in our DMs asking us like, how do you guys do it? Like, what's your secret? And it to me, and this is my biggest advice to anyone who's planning on breaking in themselves, take the time to edit, to get things right, to make sure it sounds crisp, clean. Get the best equipment you can. I know not everyone is like great in terms of like financial situation here, but you know, if you have the extra dollar, it pays to invest in the right equipment to get, you know, the best quality, because that's your name is reflected on this podcast, whatever your podcast may be. So you might as well get it right. And that's kind of like my kind of like soapbox moment there. You know, one of the coolest things too is, and we mentioned it just a little bit ago, obviously we've had the opportunity to have a lot of interesting guests on this show. The last 25 episodes have been quite a ride as far as like meeting people from around the country, around, well, not just our country, actually. So we talked to our friends up north in Canada, Face Off Hockey Pod. Go check them out. Combat Hour, we plan on having you here soon. We've met people from coast to coast, Annie in New York, Trejos in New York. We have Kayla and Bridget down there in LA. And then we have, of course, you know, our home base here in the American Southwest, New Mexico, Texas. You know, so like, you know, it's interesting. You know, one thing we have learned, so we ask all our guests, of course, the question of favorite sports movie of all time. Remember the Titans, man. It seems to be the winner for a lot of people.
Yeah, Denzel Washington does a great job in that movie.
He does. But like, I feel like there's so many other great sports movies out there. I don't know what it is about Remember the Titans just stands out too much. Maybe it's because we've had a lot of guests our age too. I feel like a lot of people grew up with like the moments like, we are the Titans, mighty mighty Titans.
I think some of it is the story behind it as well, right? Like there's other really good movies that talk about civil rights and all of that stuff, right? I'm thinking of like 42 with Jackie Robinson. But I think this was one of those first movies that came out that had not only the, hey, we have to, you know, succeed as a sports team element to it, right? That's always sort of the mantra behind a sports movie is there's a way to overcome whatever your deficiencies are. But then also the historical element behind it and the whole civil rights. How do we integrate, you know, people that haven't been integrated before? And so I think a lot of that makes it stand the test of time.
Makes sense. And obviously we know that those movies are important, especially with all the stuff going on in the news today. But with that said, we're going to focus here just on the sporting world, you know, kind of like take your mind off things, help you bust the slump, you know, just get out of the minutia a little bit. So hopefully, like if we provide a little escapism for you guys, you'll continue watching. We appreciate all your support in there. So let's kind of like get into like today's headlines and some stuff that's kind of going on. So we mentioned COVID a little bit earlier. And COVID has stolen away our NBA season to a point. And it's just been a race for which of these sports could get in first. Well, the NBA finally has thrown out some plans for us. They've thrown out multiple plans, in fact. A 16-team return plan. So that just means that all the teams that are currently in the playoffs, you stay in the playoffs, and we just get into the postseason right away. There's a 20-team idea. It involves like groups of 5 and stuff like that, playing in this like major mess, kind of like a World Cup situation. Not a big fan myself, but we'll kind of get into what our favorites are. The 22 teams. So that's going to involve a play-in tournament where basically you're going to have like your 7, 8, 9 seeds kind of all just kind of like fighting, scrapping to get that last couple spots in there. I don't like that for the Eastern Conference in particular. There's not a lot of teams that are particularly worthy in that conference. The Western Conference, there's that narrative. Is this just an opportunity to get Zion in? Let's be real. And then the 30-team return plan, which basically just entails, let's finish up this regular season, and then let's they'll do a play-in tournament, and then we'll get into postseason. All of which, July 31st is the target date. Now, Dre, when I throw out all these ideas, which one stands out to you as the best?
I mean, as a Lakers fan, and we're doing so well right now, I'm like, let's just go into the postseason. Let's just do 16 teams, take the top 16 right now. Your team would be in, my team would be in, and we'd get a lot of people in. I honestly wouldn't mind the 22 team either, though. So I'm going to have to go with either the 16 or the 22. I think the 22 could be fun in seeing some of those first-round matchups, because you're right. I think it really is sort of a, hey, how do we get Zion into the postseason? And we literally missed an entire year of Zion. He was out the entire first half of the year. He finally got to come in for a few games, and then, you know, the NBA has been shut down since then. And so it's been a rough start to somebody who's supposed to be the next LeBron James, so to speak, right? That's what everybody was saying is Zion's the next coming of LeBron James. And we saw in his first few games, he actually did pretty well. Statistically, I think there's still a lot of things that he can improve on just from an all-around basketball player. Unlike, LeBron has been pretty good everywhere. He's really developed his shot, passing, rebounds, all of that stuff. Even defensively, LeBron's done great. But I would love to see Zion make it into the playoffs, or at least have the chance. And if we stop it at 16, it sort of sucks we don't get to see him and some of those rising stars that we would normally see. So 16-game or 22-game, I'm okay with.
Well, I mean, the cool thing about Zion, obviously, is he rolls out of bed and he's worth 20 points a game. But it kind of is a stark contrast when you do hear about, like, for example, Dame Dalla actually came out this week, too, and said that if he was to play in, like, meaningless games, so this would be the situation where if they just had, like, the regular season or whatnot, then he wouldn't want to come back at all. So he wants the opportunity, obviously, to get his Blazers into the playoffs. Right now, as it would currently stand, the Blazers are about 3.5 games out, and whereas the Pelicans are actually tied with them. So the Pelicans and the Blazers are both like just scratching and clawing for that 8 seed behind Memphis. And believe me, this would be kind of cool too to see John Morant and Zion fighting for that final spot, just from a narrative perspective. The 1 versus 2. There has been that theory out there, though. Would it kind of be unfair to those higher seeds? And what I mean by that is, obviously, we've seen it in baseball, hot hand approach, like a team gets really like cooking, like in one of these like play-in tournaments and all that, and suddenly they just roll through the top seeds. I think it's a little bit more unlikely in basketball, but people have thrown that out there. Do you think it would be unfair to like the Bucks or the Lakers to have these like teams just like get fired up, play some games, and then they get to play a cold like Bucks or Lakers team who would be playing their first games of the season?
I do in some ways think that it would be unfair in that I think if you were just to get into the postseason right now, these guys have had a long time off. And a lot of them, maybe they've been working out at home. Maybe they've been able to get a jog around their neighborhood or something. But they haven't been actually conditioning like it's going to be a postseason, game, like they're in preparation for, okay, we need to kick it into high gear now that we finished the regular season. And I think that's super important. Anytime that you're an athlete at a really high level, is there's sort of a way that you plan the season. Okay, here's how I need to get in shape, and I'm going to take the entire season to get there, and I'm going to peak at the exact right time. And COVID sort of messed all of that up. And so we're going to have to think about, like, okay, how do we get these guys in shape and get them mentally prepared to go into the postseason? And I think a lot of it is going to be that first round or two is going to be making those adjustments. How do I get my rhythm back, right? Is some of these guys, they clicked right away. Anthony Davis and LeBron is who I'm thinking of just because that's my team. But even so, they have really good chemistry. It's still going to take probably a few games to build that back up and get on the same page again. And so I do think that there is some legitimate argument to be made when it comes to those first few teams that are going to play, the 8 and the 9 or whatever, get somewhat of an advantage. But at the same time, I think the NBA is so superstar driven, and that you have such a limited number of people on the floor that make an impact at any one time. At the end of the day, it's still going to come down to who the most talented team is. And as much as I like Memphis and as much as I like the Pelicans, I still don't think they're necessarily the most talented team. And so when it comes to a multiple game series, right, a 7-game series, at the end of the day, I think in basketball, you just have more of an advantage when you just have that talent as opposed to sports like baseball or even football, where there's just so many different players that can have an impact. At the end of the day, you have a LeBron James. LeBron James is still going to go off for 25 points.
Underrated element: the Orlando Magic have home court advantage, as these games would all be played in Disney World. So Mickey Mouse just making more money here, get to host the entire NBA playoffs in his arena. That's
How much of an advantage is it, though? Because I don't think they're going to have fans, right? Do you think they have fans in any of these scenarios?
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm mostly joking, but you can at least make the argument. You could say, hey, when things are over, they get to go back to their home rather than go back to their hotel.
That is true.
That's something that's kind of like one of those things you have to consider generally when you're talking about home versus road splits in general. Mm-hmm. But, one thing another good thing that I do like the possibility of, and I think it's unique to this year. I don't think that they can really do this when we get back to normal sports, normal life as a whole, is the idea of reseeding. Reseeding throughout, and of course the East versus West mix that they have. There's a lot of like really cool matchups that we wouldn't get to see otherwise that I'm excited for. For example, like Raptors Nuggets, two teams that would generally not face each other unless they manage to get to the finals. We get to see those two young squads go together in a 7-game series. And I got to say, I'm for that. And I do think if COVID's going to cause these situations, cause these hardships for us, we might as well get a little fun out of it, even if it's just for this year. So I think I'm all for just getting us into the playoffs at this point. I mean, I like Zion. Obviously, I like Dame. But I think, their season's kind of over. And I'm not going to be at a loss if they don't come back. Because you know what? We'll see Zion next year. We'll see Dame next year, hopefully. I mean, Dame's team underperformed throughout the entire regular season. So it would be kind of silly for us to, say he deserves to be in, especially because we can't just apply this to the Western Conference. We have to look at that Eastern Conference. And, no one's making the argument for the Wizards or – I don't know. Who else? Let's see. The Wizards, the Hornets, or the Bulls to somehow squeeze into the playoffs. No one wants to see that. So you can't apply the same rationale from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference. It just doesn't work based off how those two conferences have performed. At least that's my thoughts on it.
No, I totally agree with that. And we know that the East for a long time, you've got your really good guys up at the top, right? So I'm thinking your Raptors, though they might not be as good this year, but the Raptors are still tough. Your Phillies and your, Boston Celtics to sort of round out your really good teams out East. And after that, we see that there's a big drop off. And some people are saying, oh, well, what if, Kevin Durant comes back and all that? I still don't think that the Nets would really even be in that conversation. It's still a pretty big drop off. Maybe next year they will, but this year, no. So I agree with your sentiment in that. In the East, this sort of logic doesn't work as well. And I can see why people are saying, hey, this is only to get Zion into the postseason. I do like that point you made, though, too, about this would be an interesting time to be able to get some of those matchups that we don't normally see. Because the argument against just having a straight 1 through 16 seeded postseason in basketball is just the time travel, right? So let's say, you have your West Coast, one of the LA teams, or even Golden State, and they have to fly all the way to Boston just because of the way the seeds work out. And you're doing that all the time. It doesn't work. But now if everybody's just playing in Orlando, like you said, we're all stationed at Disney World. The players are all there. Now you can have some of those East versus West matchups right away in the first round. And a lot of people had always said that is LeBron James got the benefit of playing in a weak Eastern Conference. And it's like, well, now, this year at least, that's not going to happen. So we're really going to see who the two best teams are. And it may be 2 West teams, it may be 2 East Coast teams.
Now, with that said, just wait. We don't know which of these plans are going to be adopted. Are you still sticking with Bucks versus Lakers?
I do worry about the time off, right? And I think LeBron, especially in older years, it takes time, like I said, to build up to that peak moment in your season, right? Like you have to go through your bumps and bruises. And we've always seen LeBron start slow in most of his regular seasons. And then by the time he gets to the All-Star break, he's sort of firing on all cylinders. And then he gets into the playoffs and just goes off. Now I think you're almost resetting his timeline again, because really it's almost been a full, another season basically. I know we're a few months shy. And so I worry about, is LeBron going to be able just to hit the ground running? Whereas some of the younger teams in the West, right, especially like the Clippers would worry me, is I don't think it takes as much time for some of those younger superstars. Even though I know Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they're not, like Zion's age, but they're still fairly young compared to some of the guys on the Lakers. So that's what I do worry about. But it was my pick, so I'm going to stick Bucks versus Lakers.
Hey, watch out. Kawhi's got 3 months of load management at this point. So you think that knee's more than ever stable. It's good to go.
Yeah, that should not be a valid excuse, right? He should not need any more load management. Everybody's been load managing for 3 months. So
exactly. Yeah. Maybe he played back-to-back games in 2K or something. My picks, I'm still going to stick with the Bucks and Lakers. I mean, they were the 2 best teams throughout the season, and I have no reason to doubt that LeBron's going to come into this shortened postseason mess at least the most prepared he's ever been in his career. Because LeBron, I feel like he's been expecting the season to resume, whereas a lot of these teams have been kind of slacking off, at least from what I've kind of seen with his workouts from home and stuff like that. So I think he'll be prepared. I think he'll be ready. One interesting, unique element I should mention before we close with the subject, people are talking about Kevin Durant potentially sneaking back in here. Do you think it's a wise idea for KD and Kyrie Irving to come back to this postseason tournament and try and sneak in an opportunity to win it?
Personally, I think it's a really bad idea. Like you had shakeups at the coach, right, of your organization this year. And then you've had sort of a weird falling out with Kyrie Irving. I'm not going to say it's a total falling out, but some of the criticisms that he's received and criticisms he was giving his teammates. And then you're going to try to, sort of shoehorn Kevin Durant in. So you're going to have to totally rebuild the chemistry. You're already doing that with Kyrie. So now you've got new coach, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. People haven't gelled together yet. And KD's just coming back off of that injury. Do you really want to throw him into the postseason where everybody's supposed to be going 100% of the time? Like, that to me is just a recipe for, one, underperforming, and two, possibly re-aggravating or re-injuring that Achilles.
The counter to that is technically it's been about 400 days since he injured in the first place, whereas a lot of the people that have come back from that same injury have been about that 300-day range. So technically he's had more opportunity to heal it. I get what you're saying as far as, though, playoff time, you put more stress, you put more aggravation on it. But you also did mention earlier, it is a star-driven league out there.
It is.
Kyrie, KD, two of the biggest stars in the league. And I think based off, and I may be wrong about this, someone could put it in the comments and let me know, but Lakers Nets could potentially match up. And I would love to see that banger if both those teams were fully stocked and armed.
Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting matchup if KD is healthy and plays. Again, I still don't think that it's necessarily a wise decision for the Nets going forward. Like, I would say, hey, we're still going to just punt to next year. Don't worry about this season. Just because I really would be worried about going in from basically 0 to 100 when it comes to KD. It's like, you've been resting. And the good thing, like you said, is he got that 400 days of rest. So he's probably more rested than anybody else that's had to recover from this injury. But at the same time, how active has he been? So obviously when he was in a cast or a boot or whatever to keep him from moving that leg, he had basically zero activity, especially on the cardio end. And then now that there's been, COVID, he's probably had still minimal cardio. Maybe he's been jogging or biking.
Well, hey, KD, at least over the last month, he's probably had more opportunity to work out than his teammates, considering he already got it and is over with it.
That is, yeah, that's true. So maybe
we don't know.
Hey, I don't care. I can go to the gym.
We don't know about COVID's long-term effects on the cardio. A lot of the science is still up in the air in that regard. But, I'm excited that we finally have a date. Want to know what doesn't excite me, though? Baseball. Why doesn't it excite me? Because they need to get their shit together. And that is why I am so happy that this is our first podcast with a visual element. Because Rob Manfred, the MLBPA, please, for the love of God, and I'm speaking to you directly, get your shit together. The fact that the NHL and the NBA both have a more solidified plan than you right now is a major cause for concern. And honestly, you should be disappointed in yourselves. You are in one of the most low-contact sports, too, similar to what we said about the UFC, to where you had the opportunity to capitalize and get baseball games going here by early June. Well, that's not going to happen. Now you guys are talking about June 30th, maybe if we're lucky. And if that falls through, then what? Then are we going to have like a pseudo strike? We're already talking about the potential of having a real strike 2 years from now in the MLB. So you're going to have essentially 2 potential years where you have no legitimate baseball players on the field. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Because you want to turn off fans? You want to turn fans away? do this. And I was critical of Blake Snell a couple weeks ago when we talked about it, because his argument was, of course, the risk of COVID, the having his salary reduced. And we mentioned how tone deaf that statement is when you're still making 6-7 figures compared to the now 40 million Americans that are out of work. So players, commissioners, owners, whatever it takes, there needs to be baseball by the end of this month. It's an ultimatum from a fan, a true baseball fan. Ju-Ju Talk Sports, talking to you guys. Get it done.
Yeah. No, it's been disappointing, especially because so much of baseball, like you said, like you can maintain social distancing. Yeah, no problem. You can have, for instance, like you could have your umps be robotic, or at least they can do it from a distance. They could just watch the review or whatever and be like, okay, that was a strike or whatever, or no, it wasn't. You know, that was a ball or whatever from a distance. So yeah, I agree. I think baseball has sort of lagged behind in their response and how they pivot, and they were also in a position where it wasn't like the season had already been in full swing. Like the NBA, that's a lot harder to pivot because they were almost done with the season and they were just far enough to where it's like, well, we can try to continue through the season, right? And we could try to maybe finish it up and then get to a playoffs, or do we go right into the playoffs? Those were all the things that they had to think about. With the MLB, it was like, okay, you're still, in spring ball and you've still got all this time until, you get to your actual regular season. Why don't you just plan something ahead of time? And then now would be the season that most baseball fans would be watching anyways.
Yeah, the current agreement that's on the table, or at least is proposed, is 114 games, still wrapping up in late October, so normal season in that regard. And that reportedly, the MLB has taken the additional salary cuts off the table, which would mean that essentially the players get the original prorated part of their contract for whatever games they play this season that was originally talked about in March. So at this point, the money element for if you're the MLBPA is taken off the table. That's not even the biggest deal. And I hope that if you are the MLBPA, you're not using this situation as an opportunity to negotiate your CBA now 2 years ahead of when that's supposed to come to an end, which has been kind of discussed. And like I said, it's just unfortunate because if you're baseball is one of the more consistent things about it is it's always been there. It's always been there when America's been at its lowest points. One of my favorite movies is Field of Dreams, right? And I obviously can't quote the entire movie moment here from Terrence Mann's, or better known as James Earl Jones. Certainly I don't have his proper vocal accoutrement to deliver it. But what he says, it's been through the hard times, it's been through the good times, it's been when we're at our lowest, basically along that long line. One of the most magical moments in sports, and, regardless of what side you stand on the political fence on this one, George W. Bush throwing out the first pitch of the World Series post 9/11 in New York. Baseball had an opportunity to be that. Look at what the UFC did, being the first sports operation to start up. People are still talking about UFC 249 and what Dana White did, what Dana White had the balls to do. And you're just not seeing it. You're not seeing it from the players. You're not seeing it from the commissioners. There's just no sense of urgency here. And it's crazy because they need urgency. You're not going to have fans in the stands. You're losing money. You're hemorrhaging money at this point. And I think that's one of probably the biggest things that, and don't get me wrong, I guess I can't blame the players entirely, because put in this situation, we'd all want our money, right? We'd all want as much money as we can get. But given the circumstances, screwing the owners, screwing the commissioners is no way to negotiate moving forward, Because what are they going to remember in 2 years when it's time to come to the table? This moment. What's going on right now? So I don't know. It's definitely disappointing, and it's kind of heartbreaking if you're a fan. So
No, I think you're exactly right, especially when it comes to fan both attendance and watchability. Is you and I we've talked about this before. Baseball has had trouble getting fans even to go into the stands in recent years, right? So they're doing stuff like, hey, how do we change maybe even the food that's delivered at the stadiums and the pricing of the food? And they're doing all they can just to get fans into the seats. And now you don't even have that. So you really need to, hey, how do we get our product onto the television when there's nothing else so that we could capitalize in this situation? And, in contrast, like you said with UFC, is the UFC was a sport that was basically limited only to Saturday nights and pay-per-view. And I want to say since May, they've had like 4 or 5 events. So I know they had UFC 249. They just recently had another UFC Fight Night with Tyron Woodley. They had UFC Jacksonville. So they've had several events, and it's been all throughout the week. So there's even been events on Wednesday nights or on Friday nights, and as well as their typical Saturday time slot. And so this really is the time where if you're a sport, you need to capitalize on the fact that nobody else is around right now. And even regular television shows can't proceed as they normally do just because the actors literally cannot be on set at the moment. So you're basically, free game. And you're right. The MLB is not doing that. The players aren't doing that. The league is not doing that.
Yeah. The MLB, they need to be playing games before the NBA or the NHL even touch their respective courts and arenas. So that's my challenge to them. Hey guys, it's Ju-Ju Talk Sports here, and I think it's time to have an official product unboxing for the brand new Lawnmower 3.0 brought to you by Manscaped.com. Now, Manscaped is the #1 in men's grooming. Below the waist grooming, I should clarify. But as you see, this is a brand new razor, so the most I gotta worry about right now is this 2-month quarantine beard growth. I think it's time to just, go back to normal here. So learn this trick via Instagram. Should be really easy. See, all you gotta do is turn on some catchy music and turn on the machine. And just as simple as that. Get 20% off plus free shipping and handling with Manscaped.com. Promo code SLUMP. Perfect transition, though, talking about the UFC, because we did have UFC Fight Night this past Saturday. The return of Tyron Woodley. It was not the best return in the world, though. And Gilbert Burns had something to say about it. Coming in as the underdog, too, and a lot of people's minds. We did see some weird decisions as well that I'm sure you'll want to talk about a little bit here. Certainly, MMA Dre here does have an opinion about some of these decisions that have been happening lately, particularly with the lack of fan involvement or fans in the arena. So I'd love to hear you kind of inform the audience on your take there.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to have to do a little bit more research into this. But Ju-Ju, you and I, even after the first card back, right? So even after that UFC 249, where we saw Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, that fight obviously ended, so it didn't fall into the judges' hands. But on the rest of that card, there was a lot of split decisions. And something that I told you right away is I was like, I feel like there's a lot more either bad decisions or split decisions without the fans. And I think what it is there's a lot of judges in MMA right now that were not previously fighters or involved in combat sports in any way. So there's, your referees all used to be fighters of some type for the most part, right? So you've got like Herb Dean did some fighting, Big John McCarthy. They've all been involved with martial arts in some way. Obviously, the fighters know how to score fights, and you've got the commentators like your Joe Rogans or DCs. But the judges, a lot of the judges are sort of just like, hey, I'm just going to, do my thing. And they themselves have never competed. And so I think without fans in attendance to sort of cheer on some of those fighters, or when they see something that's really impactful, you always hear the oohs and the ahs from the crowd. Without that element, I think these judges are honestly lost. And they're just giving, away points to either the wrong person, or they're scoring being something that's so far off from everybody else's mind that we're just seeing really weird decisions. And even on this past card, there was a split decision where it was like, I want to say it was in the Billy Q fight. I forget.
I was going to throw that out there to you. Like,
yeah.
Did you think that Spike got screwed in that one, or what were you feeling on that?
I had felt that he had done enough to win the first 2 rounds. I think he definitely did taper at the end, and so into the third, I thought he had lost that one for sure. But I had thought that he did enough in the first and the second. Of course, he did get knocked down at the end of the first, and that's a lesson to you: never turn your back until
Ridiculous, honestly. Do you think that he knew that the round was over or still going? Because if you listen to Billy Q, what he had to say about it was like the ref told him or was repeatedly telling him, hey, we're still going, guy. What are you doing? And if you're Billy Q, jump. The guy's turn to you. You just kind of have to.
Yeah, and some people are calling it a cheap shot. Absolutely not. Like, you're in a fight, and at the end of the day, that guy's trying to hurt you. You're trying to hurt him. And if he's dumb enough, right, and I hate to use that phrase, but if you're dumb enough to turn your back in a fight after the referee has warned you, like, you're going to get hit. And if you're not sure, you keep going. I'd rather, if I'm a coach or I'm a fighter, I would rather throw a punch that's a little bit too late, like a second after the bell has rung and the referee's already motioning to stop, than stop fighting too soon and risk getting knocked out. And that's exactly what happened to Spike.
Did you enjoy Billy Q's little post-fight press conference as well, where, and I'm not going to try to attempt to say his last name because I know that was a big point of disagreement between him and DC. Is it Quarant? I'm not going to try because Billy Q, he's a talented fighter, and I don't want him coming after me. He seemed very aggressive and adamant about the pronunciation of his name.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, he really is talented. I do like the tenacity. And he'd even said, I think before the fight, he had told one of the commentators, or in some of his interviews, he's like, hey, I just know that I need to get him into deep water, which is exactly what he did. Got him into the third round. And he's like, I think Spike is going to burn out. I think he was helped a little bit, like I said, from the judges not necessarily knowing what they're doing. But he stuck to his game plan, and he's a tough fighter for sure.
Well, I know one of the other decisions that kind of caught your eye was going to be the Ivanov versus Sakai match later on, so the co-main event here. What kind of stood out to you about that one? Were you expecting – well, you were picked Sakai pre-match, but you disagreed with one of the split decisions there.
Yeah, so there was one somebody had it, I think it was like a 30-27, right? So if you don't know MMA scoring – there's, either 3 or 5 rounds, depending on whether or not it's a main or championship event versus if it's just a regular event, right? So most fights are going to be just 3 rounds, and then each round, the winner gets 10 points, and then the loser gets 9 or 8. And then there's sometimes where there's tied, right, a 10-10 round or something like that. But those are very rare and very hard to get. So for the most part, there's usually always a winner, always a loser. And so a 30-27, that doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but it really is. That means whoever got 27 lost every single round, and whoever got 30 won every single round. Mm-hmm. And so one of the judges, I think, had scored it for Ivanov 30-27, and then the other 2 had scored it 29-28 for Sakai, I believe is the way that it was. And no matter which way the 30-27 was, I was like, there is no way in the world that either one of those guys won every single round. So it's just a puzzling scorecard, and I just don't know what these judges are doing.
In my analysis, watching that fight, and we were talking about how slow those guys' punches looked and everything, once Stipe walks away, once DC walks away, Cameroonian superstar Francis Ngannou is going to roll through that division for quite a while, because those guys, they didn't even look like they belong in the same octagon as Francis.
No, and I was telling you that whole time, I was like, hey, I'm kind of excited. They're both ranked, right? So they're both 12 and 13. And so you would think that's a pretty even matchup. And 2, if you're ranked in the top 15 in the world, you would hope that it would be a good fight. And they look slow. Like, I literally think that I could have beaten them in a fight. And now that I say that,
settle down there. That's a little outside your weight class there. Just a little bit.
Yeah, but I was like, man, these guys, like, the punches were coming slow. Sakai started to, speed up a little bit towards the third. But I get, like, I understand you got to fill the match out sometimes, and you don't want to just go in guns blazing. But your punches themselves should not be slow. I understand, like, I'm going to keep my distance and throw more jabs than I'm going to, start to open up with combinations. But even the punches were, it just felt like it was so slow. Like, I could see him coming from a mile away. I was like, if you can't dodge or block this, you just shouldn't be fighting. So I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the lack of the crowd, the lack of the energy, or something like that. But that was a painful fight to watch.
Yeah, I guess one thing I'll kind of mention on the undercard, actually in the prelims too, kind of caught my eye watching that fight was the women's flyweight prelim between Shu Kagan and Antonia Shevchenko. I kind of found that one an interesting matchup because obviously Antonia's sister is at the head of that division right there.
Yep.
And you can, if you're her sister, you cannot be that excited watching Caitlin Shukakin just kind of run through her. Like every round was just her getting mauled.
Yeah, and it surprises me because normally you would think when you have siblings, right, they make each other better. So yeah, you think of the Diaz brothers. Nick was a champion in Strikeforce, right? He hasn't done necessarily as well in the UFC. I think some of that is just disagreements with Dana and other things. But still, like, the Diaz brothers were pretty tough. The entire Gracie family is generally pretty tough. The Nogueira brothers were tough back in the day. So you'd think the same would be for the Shevchenko sisters. But yeah, it was pretty rough to watch. So if you're Valentina watching your younger sister, you're probably like, oh man, I don't know about that.
All right, let's get into that main event here. Tyron Woodley, like I said, coming back off a pretty long layoff versus Gilbert Burns. Now, out the gate, Burns exploded. Like, I think he threw in like kind of a mini Superman punch in there at one point. And Woodley just looked unprepared. I think coming off a layoff like that, I feel like your strategy is usually to kind of just fill out the ring, fill out the octagon. But Burns was having none of it. He was immediately going in there for blood, and Woodley just couldn't get right. And as the rounds progressed, it just didn't seem like he had necessarily the cardio or anything to kind of like keep up with Gilbert.
No, I totally agree in that. I think when the fight had started, and I'll be honest, I had picked Woodley for that fight. I was like, hey, he's coming back. He's been in championship fights before, really tough ones. He's fought really good guys. I was like, I think he could win this. And I was wrong on that. And I think what we saw is, you're right, Tyron Woodley fights a little bit more methodical, a little bit slower pace. So we saw in the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, and those fights pissed off Dana because there was so little action. But it was because Woodley fights a little bit slower. He fights a little bit smarter, so to speak, right? Quote unquote smarter, and that he's filling out his opponent to see what he could do. When the fight had first started, Woodley actually looked okay. I was like, all right, I'm feeling comfortable with my pick. He was sort of getting in there. And I think that's when it was slower. And then I think Burns and his corner were realizing, like, hey, you got to push the pace on Woodley, because if you make it a slow fight, that's exactly what he wants. So rather than going through the whole filling out process like, Woodley does, hey, let's just rush him and overwhelm him with just pure technique and explosiveness. And that's exactly what Burns did, is got right up in his face. And we even saw a pretty good knockdown right away in the first round. And Woodley had a little bit of trouble surviving that. I thought it was going to be pretty much over. There was a few times where he almost gave up like a rear naked, and then he got, gave up full mount. I thought that Burns was going to be able to posture up and do a little bit more damage. Woodley was good and quick, explosive to get out from underneath. But after that, you just never saw him recover. And I think, going back to your point, is Burns was so explosive and he applied so much pressure. He stayed on Woodley literally the entire fight. So it's basically 25 minutes of Burns just always moving forward with some type of pressure, whether it's going for takedowns or punches, kicks. And Woodley just didn't have the answer. He wasn't able to make those adjustments.
Now, it's going to be interesting to see what that does at welterweight now, because Burns, so that's 5 straight for him, and win against a title quality guy like Woodley. So you have to think, so looking around that division there, obviously you have Masvidal, you have Colby, you have Usman, the champion. Where does he go? Who is that ideal next fight? Colby, you know, we're still kind of like waiting. So obviously in the last fight, Usman kind of checked his jaw a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think if he heals properly, that's going to be a competitive match there. Masvidal, I mean, it's kind of been a little while since his last fight, and was kind of obviously a short fight due to the stoppage with Nate Diaz. So he could get back in the ring here soon. I don't know if Burns, they're ready to throw him at Usman, but, you know, it's got to be on the table at least.
Yeah, I think it's definitely on the table. So going back to Colby Covington, this is actually an interesting story. So he was at American Top Team. And American Top Team is a really, you know, highly ranked gym. It's actually in the latest MMA 101 episode that dropped today. So 6/1 is when, you know, that episode dropped. So that's the best MMA gyms in the world.
I got to check that out myself. What am I doing here? I've just been waiting. Man,
what the heck, Ju-Ju?
I'm sorry, my friend, but have you been checking out 49 Reasons to Listen?
I have, yeah. You guys have been doing a great job.
Okay, sorry. I guess this is a one-sided friendship. My bad.
But no, and literally I just posted it up to YouTube this morning, so that is out. You can check it out. American Top Team, though, is in the top 5 gyms in the world. I will say that. And so Colby Covington used to train there. He had a little bit of a falling out with the team, and one of those team members that he had a falling out with happened to be Jorge Masvidal. And so Masvidal, Colby Covington, they're sort of bad blood now. They're both really exciting fighters. I think Colby gained a lot of respect from his fight with Usman, even though he lost that fight. And then Masvidal obviously has the BMF belt, the BMF title. So what I think the UFC should do is have those two fight each other, just because there's more storylines around that. And then honestly, I would say, hey, Burns, you get to fight Usman. I think that's going to be in a really exciting matchup. They're both really athletic, really explosive. I think Usman has the better of the wrestling skills and technique. But as far as like the actual ground and jiu-jitsu type stuff, Burns definitely has the advantage over Usman. And then on feet, I would say that they're almost even. And so it'd be really exciting. And then the winners face each other after that, right? So whoever wins out of Burns and Usman goes against the winner of Masvidal and Covington. And that's how I would set it up if I were a UFC matchmaker. Okay,
that makes sense here. So I guess let's see, before we fully get out of the world of the octagon here, because we got UFC 250 actually creeping up just this coming weekend, so I might as well get your picks now for it. Let's kind of go up the card here for you. Okay. So starting at bantamweight, we have Eddie Wineland versus Sean O'Malley. 24-13 Wineland, 11-0 for Mr. Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, Sean O'Malley's a monster. I love his style. I love the way that he approaches the fight game. I'm gonna go with O'Malley.
Okay. Next matchup at welterweight, the 22-7 Neil Magny versus the 17-5 Anthony Rocco Martin. Rocco's Modern Life.
So I have not seen Rocco Martin very much, to be honest. But so with that, I think I'm going to go with Neil Magny. I know that Neil's a really good competitor. I've seen him fight before, and that's really the main reason why I'm going. If I do some more analysis, I might change that pick like before the day of the fight. But as of right now, I'll go Neil Magny.
At bantamweight, we have the 16-3 Aljamain Sterling versus the 12-1 Corey Sandhagen.
Yeah, so I want to say Aljamain Sterling lost one of his fights recently to one of the top competitors in their weight class. So I think, let's see, I want to say Sterling had lost to the number one, who might have been Marlon Moraes.
Okay.
Which isn't a bad loss. But I think Sandhagen, he definitely has the reach and the height. Which I know it doesn't always play a factor at those smaller weight classes. I think I'm going to go Sandhagen in this one.
All right. The co-main event, also at bantamweight, we have the 27-7 Rafael Assunção.
Oh, Assunção.
Okay. Versus Cody Garbrandt at 11-3.
Yeah, I worry about Cody Garbrandt's chin now. Ever since he had gotten knocked out, he just has not been the same. So at one point, he looked super smooth. He looked unstoppable, and he was just knocking out everybody. And then I forget who it was that he lost to. I know that he beat Dominic Cruz. I think he had lost to TJ Dillashaw or something like that and got knocked out right away. And since then, since then, he's sort of been on just this downhill trajectory. So I'm going to take a Sun Sal in that one.
All right. Our main event, the incredible, the phenomenal, the arguable, greatest of all time women's champion, Amanda Nunes at 19-4 versus Felicia Spencer from Canada. Oh, Canada.
I mean, we've seen crazy stuff happen in the octagon, but is anybody really picking against Amanda Nunes right now? Like, I just don't see a woman on the planet that stops her. And maybe Nunes has hit her peak and she's on the downhill or something. I don't see it, though. So I've got to go Amanda Nunes. I've seen her beat literally the best women in the world. She's beaten Holly Holm. She, tore through Ronda Rousey. She beat Cyborg. She beat what's her name that was also at 145.
Miesha Tate.
I'm
pretty sure she beat Miesha Tate. Yeah,
she beat Miesha Tate. The other one, I was thinking she's a kickboxer. I forget her name. She was scared to fight Cyborg actually, so she was the first 145. Jermaine Durandame. So
okay.
She beat Jermaine Durandame.
That's those are all like practically Hall of Famers in the UFC too.
When it comes to women's MMA, though, that's like a lot of those faces are going to be on your Mount Rushmore of women's MMA, and Amanda Nunes has run through them all. So I just don't see her losing. Yeah,
like way back when we were talking about the best fighter of the decade, we gave it to Ronda Rousey just because she set the establishment for women's fighting. But Amanda Nunes has taken it to just new levels in terms of competition. We're still waiting for that personality to kind of develop for her. Hopefully it doesn't happen too far, like when she's done with the titles, but it's hard to argue with the dominance, that's for sure. I guess I have one more, too, for you. So,
okay,
Jon Jones, his current contract situation, he's talking about bailing out on the UFC. What do you think of this for Jon? We know he's out there stopping riots in Albuquerque, but what's he going to do when it comes to the octagon?
I think I can't see him just calling it quits. He would very easily get a job with another organization if Dana White and the UFC are willing to part ways with his contract, but I don't think that they are. Like, why would you? I know I talk a lot of crap about Jon Jones just because I don't agree with the personal choices, and in my opinion, he's a cheater because he's abused steroids multiple times. But still, he's arguably the best light heavyweight on the planet, right? We haven't really seen him lose outside of failed drug tests, and even his disqualification, he was well on his way to dominating Matt Hamill, and it was a bad rule. Everybody thinks it should be changed, but so with Jon Jones, he's the best fighter on the planet in his weight class. Why would you release him? And if he doesn't want to fight, if I'm Dana, I'm saying, okay, fine, you don't have to fight. I'll remove you from the rankings and we won't give you any fights, but we're keeping your contract so you can't fight anywhere else. So I don't think that we see him fight in any other organization is what I will say. I think he'll be back though. I think eventually, everybody sort of needs money, and Jon lost a lot of money from his time, when he was away, right? Whether it was because of, the drugs and the hit and run stuff or his suspensions from steroids. And so normally, right, like there's a lot of guys where we're like, hey, that person is set. Like a Conor McGregor, if he were to walk away today from the sport, nobody says anything. He's got his millions. He's nice and set. But Jon Jones lost a lot of sponsorship money. He lost a lot of time in the octagon. So I just don't think that Jones is maybe as financially set to be able to fully walk away. I think he still needs a few more fights before he can retire.
All right. That's going to be a nice little cap on our MMA discussion. Now, our next little thing, a little special thing for episode 50 here. We don't claim to be the most original in this regard, but, because Colin Cowherd has done it, Dan Le Batard has done it. But as a wise person once told me, only you can do things the way you do it. Or something like that. I don't know. I might have been a little drunk when I heard it. Close enough. Anyway, we're going to do a little athlete spelling bee right here. So I'm going to be testing out my co-host, Andre Wynn's knowledge on the most premier, hardest names in the sporting world today. And basically see how you do. Are you smarter than a fifth grader, I guess, is the main question here. Or is that the wrong game show? I don't know. They're all the same. I know ESPN had to cancel their spelling bee, so that's why a lot of sports personalities have taken on the challenge of doing this. And I like it. I think it's a fun idea. So, Dre, whenever you get a name or a spelling correctly, here is the sound you will hear. When you answer a question incorrectly, you will get one of these. So
you're going to hear a lot of the second one, probably.
Pretty much there. So I'm actually going to start you off with a softball one here first. It's going to be your own personal QB here of your Pittsburgh Steelers, Mr. Ben Roethlisberger. You only have to do the last name on this one.
Okay. Roethlisberger.
All righty. Survey says you got that one right.
If I had missed that one, I'd have to turn in all my Steelers stuff.
Yes, so. Well, here's going to be the one for my Niners fanhood here. Our starting QB, Mr. Jimmy Pornstar Garoppolo. You only have to spell out Garoppolo. You don't have to spell out Pornstar.
Okay, so I think it's G-A-R. Oh, man, G-A-R. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's another R. So G-A-R-A-P-P-O-L-O.
Survey says.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the correct spelling there is Garoppolo. So no A.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mixed up an A and an O.
All right. This one's going to have you freaking pissed, as I'm going to have you spell out the last name of the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo.
You can't even pronounce it right. I have to spell it.
Yep, Antetokounmpo. There we go. Last name, go for it, Dre. I believe in you.
Okay. A-N-T-E-T-E. Okay. K-U-M-P-O-U.
It pains me that I have to do this, my friend, but the correct spelling is A-N-T-E-T-O. So this is where you're wrong. Oh my
gosh, yeah.
K-O-U-N-P-N-M-P-O.
That is just freaking.
It's a nightmare. I'm sorry. I had to do that to you, man. I hate that I had to, but I had to. Now, because you are MMA Dre, I have to throw in a couple of MMA fighters here. So
it's
only the best.
Ju-Ju, right? Is she
on there? Dre, why did you have to give away the big reveal here?
Okay. Okay. Rewind. We'll act like that never happened.
No. We have to rock and roll here. We're basically live with the video. So
okay.
All righty. Joanna Jojacek. It's Polish. It's a Polish name. It's a fine Polish name. Hit me with that last name.
So ever since we said we're doing the spelling bee, I was like, crap, I know I'm going to get Joanna Jojacek in the spelling bee, and I know I'm not going to know how to spell it. So I know it starts with a J-E-R.
Okay.
It's like J-E-R-D-R-Y, like Z-Y-K or something like that. C-K. I don't know.
Let's see how you did.
Yeah, I knew I was not getting that one.
It was actually J-E-D-D. R-Z-E-J-C-Z-Y-K.
See, why can't you just be like LeBron James? I could spell that one.
Can you? Can you now?
I would hope so.
You have 5 seconds to spell out LeBron James. Go. No, I'm kidding. All right. So this is going to close it out. Truly the best, arguably the best, the cream of the crop.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Khabib Nurmagomedov.
All right. Last name?
Last name. Well, no, let's finish strong. Both names.
Okay. So Khabib is Khabib, and then Nurmagomedov. So Nurmagomedov.
All right. Let's see how that one came out for you.
Yeah,
we're closing it out on a positive note here. You got it. I guess you've been analyzing the Russian too fondly.
Oh man, yeah, I've been watching Khabib since he got into the UFC, right? Back when guys were afraid to fight him, and Rafael dos Anjos was the biggest name that was willing to fight him, and he throttled Rafael dos Anjos. So if I didn't get that one again, I would have to give up, my MMA Dre title.
Hey, started off right on the first one, closed it out strong with the last one. That's all we can ask for, right?
Exactly.
All right, so 50 episodes in the books. That'll do it for us here. At Slumpbuster Podcasts on IG, at Slumpbuster Pod on Twitter, folks. Why don't you hit that subscribe button? You can see us now, so I think I'm pointing to the subscribe button. It's somewhere in this general vicinity. I may be wrong. If not, it's one of these two corners of me. I don't know which way the screen mirroring is going to point me in, but hit that subscribe button. We'll be back with another episode, another fantasy football episode this week. 3 episodes this week. We're coming in strong. Check us out. Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. And folks, we'll see you next time. Peace.